Welcome to our post-election webcast brought to you by Energy Nation. Energy Nation is a grassroots advocacy community sponsored by the American Petroleum Institute that allows people who work in America's oil and natural gas industry, people like you and I, the opportunity to learn about and act on issues that are critical to our industry. We're also joined today by our friends from American Petroleum Institute's group, Energy Citizens. So welcome to everyone. My name is Tara Smith Anderson, and I'm the Director of External Mobilization for API, and I will be moderating today's discussion with my colleague, Eric Melito, who's API's Director of Upstream. Eric's going to be answering your questions, so let's put him to work. Before we get started, just a couple items of business. Over the last couple of weeks, you all have been submitting questions, energy-related questions, for this discussion. Please know that if you have any questions during this broadcast, that you can submit them, and if we don't get to them today, we'll answer them in the coming weeks. To submit additional questions, please use the chat box on this page or visit Energy Nation's Facebook or Twitter channels. And again, if we don't get them today, we'll answer them in the upcoming weeks. With that, I'm ready to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who can maybe take a few minutes and walk us through some industry developments over the past few weeks.
Yeah, and actually out of all of 2012 was a very exciting year for this industry. And one of the main reasons why we're seeing the excitement that's so evident in this industry and in the oil and gas sector is because we're in the midst of an energy revolution. We had a report come out in 2012 that shows that the U.S. is projected to become the leading producer of oil in the world within a few short years. And we're also known to be sitting on huge deposits of natural gas, a clean burning fuel, and we're looking at 100, perhaps 150 to 200 years of supplies of natural gas. And this is all due to the commitment of Energy Nation, folks like you who are out there working to bring the supplies to the country. And I'd like to point out that in all my relations with folks in the industry, folks in the Energy Nation, we see a continued commitment to doing things right, to environmentally safe and responsible drilling and operations. The other key reason why 2012 was so big and the other developments we saw had to do with the election year. When we started out 2012, unemployment was the key issue, the economy was a big issue, the recession, and we saw this as a huge opportunity. And we'd like to thank those in the Energy Nation, those energy citizens who went out there and used their voice and made sure the industry had a voice in the debate. And this opportunity provided us with a moment to talk about how these key issues can be addressed through this industry. Job creation, revenue generation by getting out there and developing resources. We can create government revenues, and we can do it without taxing anyone. We can just get out there and provide the access, which provides the bonuses, the royalties, the rentals, and the income taxes that provide billions of dollars to the economy. A lot of people don't realize that. And energy security is a huge issue that we face, and we're seeing our nation becoming more and more energy secure. So it's through efforts, through mobilization efforts. And mobilization is kind of a funny word, but it means basically getting folks out and becoming part of a movement to educate policymakers and letting folks know that you work in the industry and energy is a crucial issue and it is a solution to many of the problems we face.
That's right. And as you mentioned, we undertook a very strong voter education program this year, obviously trying to get people educated and motivated to visit the ballot box and to vote for energy. So do you want to walk us through a couple of items from that program?
And if you look at what we've done in the past year through API and through the efforts of Tara and others in the industry, both within API and outside of API, within the companies, we went and moved forward with the Get Out the Vote campaign as well as Vote for Energy. And what does that mean? People come up to us and say, what's Vote for Energy? And it's about looking at issues more so than just the candidates. It's about recognizing that energy is an issue for decades to come, and that when we look at our future, we as an industry support all of the above. We support the development of biofuels, of renewables, and it's this industry that's actually a leading investor in those types of energy forms. When you look at the investment in both research and development as well as application of these technologies, the oil and gas industry is the leading investor. A lot of people don't know that, but as we move forward and look at our future, we're going to need more oil, more natural gas, and this is the industry that's going to bring that, and it's going to be the industry to really drive the economy in the way we need. So when we talk about voting for energy, we talk about looking at the issues and recognizing that there are opportunities through Congress, through the executive branch, through state legislatures to talk to policymakers and see what their position is, and let them know that we need to move forward and take advantage of these opportunities, because if we don't put to work and put to use these opportunities, if we don't get out there and develop lands, if we don't get out there and develop pipelines, if we don't get out there and invest in refining, in the marketing of the product, then we're not going to get the benefit of the jobs. We're not going to get the benefit of energy security, and we'll become more reliant on potentially hostile areas around the world. So it's been a full campaign. It's been a very successful effort, because we had more than 30,000 Energy Nation members, as well as energy citizens, sign up for the Vote for Energy pledge. And we also had a lot of materials that were developed and provided so that we can promote energy as a critical issue for the country in the years to come, as well as rallies. And we hosted events in people's homes to watch the debates and talk about energy. And what we saw was a campaign that has evolved, where in 2009 we saw the president talking about oil and natural gas as being fuels of the past, and now all of the above, as being oil and gas being part of our a necessary energy portfolio that this country needs. And that's because of these types of efforts. It's because of folks becoming part of the Energy Nation. It's because of folks like Energy Citizens getting out there and talking about it, and meeting and gathering at the local grassroots level to promote oil and gas as a vital component of our future. So it's been good, it's been effective, and the debate doesn't stop here. We went through an election cycle, but we have to continue to make sure that energy stays a part of the debate, and that oil and gas stays as a key component of the debate, because oil and gas is here to stay. There's 250 million cars on the road. It's oil that is driving them. It's natural gas that's heating our homes, and it's natural gas liquids that are helping companies set up chemical plants, and it's helping the natural gas industry is helping the manufacturing sector set up shop here. So it's oil and natural gas that are truly driving the economy, and we have to continue to be part of the debate so we continue to drive positive discussion and drive policy decisions in the right direction.
That's right. And we were so active in the election cycle. People truly did vote for energy, and they used that as talking points when speaking to candidates. You know, it is important where your candidate sits on energy issues. So I think we did a really good job at that. Of course, like you said, our work's not done, but it was a great first step. Why don't we talk for a minute about the state of American energy? As you know, API annually releases a report in January, and there are activities surrounding that. Do you have any insight on what will be included in the state of American energy?
Well, when you look at State of American Energy, it's a great way to start off every year on the right foot when it comes to focusing on energy as a key issue. And Jack has an event every year where we try to bring together the policymakers to let them know that we have to continue talking about energy, to be the solution for unemployment, to create the jobs, to really drive us to the 1.4 million jobs that we could create if we have additional access to resources. You know, over the next 10, 20 years, we can create a heck of a lot of jobs to create government revenues. We're looking at the potential to generate $800 billion in government revenues over that same period through 2035, and to generate homegrown U.S. energy. And so when we have the State of American Energy, we use that as an opportunity to talk about the importance of investing in America, investing in U.S. energy projects as a means to meeting those ends. But we also need to talk about how the government plays a role in that, and that is by looking at things like having access to resources, making sure we're not restricting opportunities, having a permitting regime in place that is streamlined and eliminates bureaucracy and red tape so that companies have the certainty and the predictability they need in investments, reducing regulatory overburden. We support making sure we have effective regulations in place, but a lot of times what we see are duplicate regs that don't really provide a benefit given the costs that are being imposed on the industry. And we also need to really look at these punitive tax measures that are trying, we hear a lot about policymakers looking at this industry as a means to generate revenue when this is one of the highest taxed industries in the country.
Right.
It's got an effective tax rate of more than 41%, whereas most other industries have an effective tax rate around 24 to 26%. So we are one of the most heavily taxed industries, yet we continue to hear discussions about increasing taxes on this industry. And the studies we've seen show that increasing taxes discourage investment. So we're focusing on investing in America, and if you're taking money and capital away from companies and from folks in the energy nation who are part of these companies, then you're taking away the opportunity to invest in America. And the other thing is permitting of shovel-ready projects like the Keystone XL pipeline, which has been sitting idle for a long time. The shovels are ready to get out there and do the work to create those jobs immediately, and so that we can move forward with that. So we continue to come out with the state of the American energy every January to refocus the policymakers on these issues at hand and to make sure we're not handicapping this industry as we compare it to other industry or other parts of the world. The U.S. needs to lead. When I work with folks in the energy nation, when I work with the innovators within this industry, we find out that we have these opportunities because we're smart here in the United States, because we bring the ingenuity and the innovation, and we've come up with the technologies to do it right and to do it safely. We should continue to lead. We shouldn't watch other countries develop in the Arctic.
Sure.
When we're sitting back and watching them do it, they're becoming the leaders, they're developing the technologies, and we're sitting back watching and not taking advantage of those opportunities. So that's just one example of many where we need to continue to lead, and I think we're all raised that U.S. leads and doesn't follow. So I think that's what State of the American Energy is all about.
Well, and that's actually a perfect segue. I'd like to next move to some questions from that have been submitted for this webcast. And first, the question is about Keystone. It comes from Hudson, and he asks, what are the latest developments with the Keystone XL pipeline, and why is this so important?
Well, it's so important for two reasons. One is energy is the key issue that we continue to face when it comes to being able to create jobs and government revenues and getting out there and driving the economy forward. This is so important because approval of this by the President will generate those jobs immediately. We'll see those jobs in place, and we'll see them at work almost right as that pen is put to paper, and we see that approval. So it's about using our industry as a means for reviving the economy. But also it's about energy security. When we look at those countries that we import from and who our partners are, we look at energy security from the lens of being partners with our allies, with those who we have long-standing relationships with, those stable countries that we want to rely on because we have such a strong relationship with them. So we're looking at Canada. Canada is the country that we get most of our imports from when we look globally as to who we import resources from, and we have this strong relationship with Canada. Now, Canada has a choice. They could send this oil sand product to the U.S. refineries at 800,000 barrels a day, or it can be sold to other countries from around the world like China, and our refiners have invested tremendous capital to make sure they have the ability and the capacity to refine this type of crude. So it's a win-win-win. It's getting resources from a stable partner, and it's creating jobs really at the outset. And the other thing I would highlight is the oil sands are a critical asset from a North American standpoint, but they're a critical asset when it comes to the U.S. economy. When you're looking at the Canadian oil sands and the investments that will occur in U.S. refineries, in the pipeline, in developing the oil sands, both direct and indirect jobs in terms of the companies in the United States to provide the construction equipment, to the companies in the United States to provide the work boots. We're looking at approximately 500,000 jobs that could be created from all this investment.
Right.
So the Keystone XL pipeline is one aspect of it, but development of those oil sands are huge to our economic benefits, are huge in terms of the economic benefits to the United States. So we need to continue to work with Canada and have that secure relationship and have that security in those supplies for this country, because when you combine the supplies we get from Canada with the supplies we could get from the U.S., we could be essentially creating and developing the oil and natural gas from the U.S. and Canada that really equate to the amount of oil and natural gas we will consume in I think the year 2024 or 2026. So it's energy sufficiency, it's energy security,
Sure.
and when you do it from a North American standpoint, you're relying on secure supplies. So there's layer upon layer as to why these Canadian oil sands and the Keystone XL pipeline are so critical.
Well, I know that Energy Nation has been particularly active on this issue and has sent thousands of letters to both the White House and to the State Department urging passage of the entire pipeline. I know that there's an opportunity right now. Do you want to talk about where the Keystone situation currently is?
Well, we're currently looking at the hearings that are coming up about the revised environmental impact statement. And so the public has an opportunity to weigh in. Energy Nation will have an opportunity to weigh in. Energy Citizens will have an opportunity to weigh in. So the process continues. We think it should have been approved a long time ago.
Sure.
The President approved the southern leg, which was a bit easier to allow a move forward, given that it takes less action from the executive branch of the United States government. When it comes to taking the action to get the whole thing approved, that lies in the President's hands and the State Department's hands. But what we're looking at is the next step really being getting through this next environmental review and making sure that that is followed by a positive decision approving the permitting of the pipeline. So what we want is to continue to see on all these issues, continue to see our supporters within the industry, within Energy Nation, and outside the industry with Energy Citizens mobilizing and being part of the movement to talk to policymakers at every level, whether it's mayors, county commissioners, folks in the state legislators, most importantly on decisions like this with folks in Congress and in the Senate, as well as at the State Department and at the White House. We're talking about sending letters and making phone calls, and all this information will be available through Energy Nation to help you out and help you to be able to go out there and have your voice heard on this.
That's a great point. I mean, the fight isn't over yet. So now is the opportunity, even if you've already taken action, to visit energynation.org and send a letter to your senators and your congressmen and tell them how important this is to you as someone who works in the industry, if you're part of Energy Nation, or to all Americans, for those of you that work with Energy Citizens. So now's the time. With that, let's go ahead and jump to another question. This time it comes from Houston, from Kenneth. He wants to talk about taxes facing oil and natural gas industry. Kenneth asks, what is the likelihood that the oil and gas industry will be singled out for punitive taxation, and what effect will that have on U.S. and overseas exploration and production?
Well, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. You know, we're in the middle of the fiscal cliff debate, and we keep trying to get the good word out and educate folks on the importance of not putting in place punitive taxes on an industry. I talked earlier about how this is already a heavily taxed industry. When you look at the amount of money the oil and gas industry provides to the federal government, it is astonishing. It is $86 million per day.
Per day.
And you want to increase that. Not a good idea. And the studies that we've seen demonstrate that, as I said earlier, increasing taxes on this industry takes capital away and takes money away that we can invest in these projects, and ultimately it shifts that capital to other parts of the world. So you'll end up having additional investment outside the U.S. and jobs created outside of the U.S. So what we're trying to talk about is the other approach, the more sensible approach, the better choice to provide access to resources.
Sure.
If you increase taxes, you end up going down a road of taking capital away, reducing investment, actually bringing in less revenue to the government over time because less money is being spent here, essentially ultimately destroying jobs and job opportunities, and resulting in less production of oil and natural gas here in the United States. So 3 big negatives. If you provide access, you get the benefit of additional production of U.S. resources, getting us closer to energy security. You get the benefit of the creation of additional jobs.
Right.
And what we're looking at through 2035 is the creation of approximately 1.4 million jobs when you look at all the different ways that we can promote access to resources by opening up the offshore, the Eastern Gulf, the Atlantic, the Pacific, areas of the Rockies, ANWR, streamlining permitting, taking roadblocks away from that are creating obstacles to the industry in terms of developing resources. And then the other thing is the government revenues it provides are would equate to $800 billion through 2035. So it's a win-win-win when you look at providing access, and it's a lose-lose-lose when you look at increasing taxes. And the other thing we have to realize is when you're looking at the oil and gas industry, you got to look at who owns it. And when you look at who owns oil, and we would ask you to go to the website, who owns big oil, it's generally retirement funds, investment funds, 401ks, it's institutional investors. Very little of that money is by fat cats in cowboy hats and cowboy boots who are sitting back at their ranches. It truly is.
It's you and I.
Yeah.
It's all of us.
If we look at who is invested in it, it's firefighters, it's policemen. And if we look at the past several years, even during a recession, this is an industry that has created jobs, whereas a lot of other industries have taken a hit on jobs. And this is an industry that has actually provided a benefit to retirement funds, 401ks. The rate of return when investing in this industry has been very high, and the shareholders are you and I when it comes to who's investing in it, and it's folks who have retirement funds, and it's because the people in charge of investing in retirement funds and 401ks look at the oil and gas industry as a stable investment. So taxing the oil and gas industry essentially is taxing everyone, because that's who invests in the industry. So we got to be careful about that type of debate and make sure we're not going down some kind of slippery slope where we're creating too many negatives.
Biting off our nose to spite our face, exactly. All right, thanks. Let's do another question. This time it comes from Rod in New Mexico. Rod asks, what will happen with drilling permits on federal lands? Will there be any issued?
Well, we're hoping that because of efforts like this, the energy debate is being reshaped. The federal lands have traditionally been a huge part of the U.S. energy supply. In recent years, the offshore provided us with 30% of our domestic production of oil, more than 10% of natural gas. Onshore lands were one of the most critical places where we found natural gas for the economy. So we need to keep letting policymakers know that we have this tremendous resource base on federal lands. And the other thing we have to realize that while we've seen this boom on private land, and a lot of that's because it's been easier to develop on private lands because of the pace of permitting and the certainty you have and what the regulations are and the ability to get access. A lot of the public lands are right there adjacent to private lands. So you're looking out west in the Rockies, if you're looking at North Dakota, you're looking at Montana, Wyoming. These are all areas that are being developed on private and state lands, but that could be developed by the federal government on federal lands. And we're not talking about national parks or wilderness areas. Congress sets aside wilderness areas. Congress creates national parks. These are pristine areas that are kept off limits. What we're talking about are multi-purpose lands that have been designated for lots of different activities. They're there for recreation, forestry, they're there for oil and gas, coal, they're there for snowmobiling, everything else. And what our industry has shown is that we can get out there and have multiple uses in coexistence, and we can do it in a way that protects the environment, that protects species, that allows recreation to continue, that allows hunters and fishermen to get out there and do their thing. And it's a huge benefit that we would have to getting to these public lands and providing access to them. So they are a really strategic, important asset. And over the past several years, we've seen a tremendous slowdown in permitting, in leasing, and that is something that is going to be hard to recover from as we look at a long-term national security, national energy strategy. We can't just look at the short term. We got to look at what are we going to need in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. What are we going to need? Oil and natural gas. Where can we find them? Federal land. And the oil and natural gas that we're developing today in the offshore in the Rockies is because we made positive decisions 5, 10, 15 years ago that allow us to continue those investments today and allow us to put these multi-billion-dollar projects in place, create the jobs, and have that investment here in the United States and generate those government revenues here in the United States. The other thing I'd like to add is it is on federal lands that we get the benefit of the revenues to the federal government. We see a lot of activity in private and state lands, so you'll see private landholders, state governments, and you'll see the federal government get a benefit from the corporate and individual income taxes that are associated with that. But on federal land, I talked about this before, you will have a lease sale in the offshore that will bring in upfront $1, $2, $3 billion to the federal government. Billion.
Okay.
And then after that, you will have each of those leases providing rentals to the government every year until those leases expire. When those leases expire, they go back to the government. The government can then issue them again and get more bonus bids. It's a great system. The industry takes on all the financial risk. And then once these leases go into production, the government gets the benefit of the royalty payments, which is a tremendous benefit. The income coming in to the government from oil and gas revenues like this recently has been in the range of about $6 billion, but in recent years it's been as high as $18, $20 billion.
Really?
So we can't forget that it is on federal land and access to federal lands that we provide this additional benefit to the taxpayer and to the government in terms of government revenues flowing in. That's where you need to go to get additional revenues, not through increased taxation.
Sure. That makes complete sense. Let's do another question. This one's on fracking. This one comes from online. So it reads, has natural gas development really been a game changer for the United States? And is this fracking safe?
It truly has been a game changer. And I think the way to look at it is approximately 5 years ago, we were talking about having a shortage of natural gas. And the assumption was we would be importing $100 billion in natural gas per year from Australia, Russia, the Middle East, and Africa. And what are we seeing now? The opposite. The debate is now moving toward we might have an opportunity to export. And the president has a strategy, a plan in place to push the United States as an exporter. It's better when you look at the trade imbalance and,
Sure.
the U.S. trade with other parts of the world for us to be exporting and bringing the investment to the United States rather than us continuing to be an importer. So this is a tremendous opportunity for us to move forward with what the president has said is his overall strategy to increase U.S. exports. And we have that opportunity because of this abundance of natural gas that we're now seeing. We were looking at, I think, in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe 5% of our natural gas supply, maybe 2 to 5%. I don't have the number in front of me, but a very small amount of it coming from these tight formations, from
Sure.
shale formations, from tight sandstones. And now we're moving forward and looking at almost all of it will be coming from these tight formations. And what's allowing that to happen? Hydraulic fracturing. It's the combination of hydraulic fracturing, where we're drilling to 5,000 to 10,000 feet below the surface and going horizontally another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 feet, and going through drilling below really impermeable layers of rock, such that any groundwater or aquifers are truly isolated. So it's a proven practice, and hydraulic fracturing has been around for close to 60 years, and it's it's truly a proven practice because we don't have one documented case of hydraulic fracturing ever contaminating groundwater supplies. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it right, and the oil and gas industry can do it right, and the way we're doing it right is the implementation of standards and best practices. It's through well construction and well design. The American Petroleum Institute is a standards developing organization, and we've developed best practices and standards on this. We have a document, Standard 65 Part 2, on isolating zonal flows. It's a very technical document, but it is the standard used by the federal government for drilling offshore wells. That same document applies to drilling onshore wells, and we're out there promoting that and pushing that. It's this industry that develops these standards for ensuring that we are cementing our wells appropriately so we don't have contamination, and so that we're isolating the well that we're drilling from Mother Nature, so that we have that 10 inches of steel casing and cement protecting Mother Nature from the wells we're drilling. We're also implementing best practices and best management practices and standards when it comes to water management. Where are you getting your water from? How you're using it? How you're transporting it? How are you storing it at your site? What are you doing to with the water once you're done with it? And what we've seen with the industry in a place like Pennsylvania is moving toward recycling. So we're using less water and we're using it more efficiently. Surface management, making sure that we're protecting the environment at the surface, making sure that we have measures in place to prevent contamination at the surface. Working locally with local communities is another area where we're focusing. We're developing a best practice, a guidance document for the industry so that the industry can work together with local communities to look at things like traffic, noise, dust, housing, the things that are most important to these local communities at that truly local level. So we've come a long way, and it's through the innovation and the technological advancement and ingenuity of this industry in terms of being able to come up with these technologies to do this. It is a proven technology. It is safe and environmentally responsible, and we're looking at it from a perspective that it actually provides environmental benefits. In 1998, the Department of Energy came out with a study, and this is under the Clinton administration, and the Department of Energy talked about the environmental benefits of advanced technologies. In that report, hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling were two technologies that provide environmental benefits. The reason why: smaller footprint, less impact because you're drilling several wells from one well pad. They looked at water use, emissions, all these different things, and these are practices that really truly provide environmental benefit. And when you look at the life cycle of the use of natural gas, you ultimately have less emissions when it's used in electricity generation. So these are all benefits that we have to be touting. And then in the end, when we look at where we're going to get our natural gas from and where we're going to get our crude oil from over the next 20, 30, 40 years, it's only going to be through the use of hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. You take those away, this energy revolution could go away. So we have to continue as an industry to talk about why we do it right, how we do it right, and why it's important to be allowed to continue doing this, because this is really what's driving this energy revolution that is making the U.S. become more energy secure and the leader around the world. So when we talk about being the leading producer of oil in 2020, it's because of hydraulic fracturing. When we talk about exporting rather than importing $100 billion in natural gas a year, that's because of hydraulic fracturing. It's a great story. We should all be proud of it, and we should all be touting it.
Wow, that is great. Okay, so are you tired yet? I think we have time. One more question?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, one last question from Bill in Oregon. Bill wants to know, what can we do to get the administration more interested and convinced that we need to develop our own resources here in America?
It's continuing with the debate that we're having right now that we had over the last year through the election cycle. And it's really through not people like me talking about it, it's through people in the industry talking about it. It's friends of the industry talking about
Energy Citizen, Energy Nation, exactly.
It's folks who work for companies like Caterpillar who are providing the construction equipment. It's folks who work for boot manufacturers. It's folks who work in the catering business who provide meals to the offshore. Folks like that, I think, have the most credibility when coming and talking to policymakers, when sending letters, when making phone calls, because they're constituents. They're the folks who vote in those districts, but they're also telling the story like it is. When a policymaker hears from somebody from the Energy Nation and hears them talk about how they're committed to doing it right, they're committed to outstanding performance, continuous improvement in operations, they're continuing to make things better. That's very resounding with policymakers. So I would just encourage, I would first of all like to thank everybody who's become part of Energy Nation, part of the Energy Citizen Nation as well, to continue doing it, because you have the most impact on policymakers, because you're in the trenches, you're really at the heart of what this energy revolution is all about. And it's through your stories and through the work that you do that you can help convince the people who are making these decisions that these are the right decisions, because they truly are.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and with that, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. As we mentioned before, the American Petroleum Institute will be unveiling our State of American Energy in January 2013, so stay tuned for more information on that. And otherwise, I would just like to thank you again for joining in today. Please feel free to share anything you've learned today with your friends and families, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.